14th, 2017. The time is 7:45 p.m. At this point, if we could get a roll call, Pat.
Hendrickson?
Here.
Kenny?
Here.
Malat?
Here.
Reed?
Here.
Rule?
Here.
Traxler?
Here.
Tome?
Here.
All present.
All right, this is a notice of an open meeting. Now we're looking for an approval of the agenda. I would like to remove item number 14 after consulting with City Administrator Vander Sanden. There is no update on that item. So if we could approve the agenda without item number 14, I would take a motion on that.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda without item number 14. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda is approved without item number 14. Citizen comments on agenda items. I did not retrieve the sheet. I'm not sure if anybody was signed up to speak. Thank you, Pat. Okay. We'll assume since it's over there, no one's signed up since. All right. Department reports are in the packet. It's basically just informational. Is there any discussion on the department reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to discussion of snowmobile trails, item 6. So at this point, I believe we all have in front of us a draft ordinance now that we got through all the confusion in the regular meeting of what ordinances we were repealing and what ordinances existed and didn't exist. So the draft ordinance that was just placed in front of us is to repeal sections 98-186 through 98-190 of the City Code of Ordinances and recreate the section as 98-186 regarding snowmobiles. I just got this in front of me, so I think we might have to take a second here to kind of peruse this, or if maybe Attorney Johnson could speak to some of the significant points.
As you peruse, I drafted this following the last committee of the whole meeting with the idea that the entire section of the code regarding snowmobiles, which is 98-186 through 98-190, was going to be repealed in its entirety, and then this was the replacement. Now, this replacement is drastic and rigid in that it basically says it's unlawful to operate any snowmobile on city streets, alleys, parks, parking lots, or public land, or parking lot held open to the public, period, end of conversation. That's what it says as drafted right now. A snowmobile can be operated on private land within the city between the hours, or except between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., and snowmobiles can be operated for law enforcement and public utility purposes. It took out all of the city trail part. It took out the residential access part. It basically stripped down everything and left you with nothing except if you had a private landowner who wanted to run around in his backyard. That's what you have in front of you right now. That is subject to whatever you'd like to do with it.
Thank you very much, Attorney Johnson, for providing this to us and giving us your synopsis. The floor is open to discussion at this point. Mr. Kenny?
Paul, just to make sure that it's clear, subsection C, a snowmobile on private land within the city. So a person can do donuts in their backyard, or they could run across multiple contiguous privately owned pieces of property if consent is acquired from every single private owner of those pieces of property.
That would be correct.
That all falls into the purview of that language.
Right.
Okay.
And you can't do it between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
That is correct again.
Regardless of public or private.
So just kind of jumping off of that, let's, for the sake of argument, say that someone was able to put together enough private property landowners to get approval to create a trail. Other than the restriction on hours, the city really wouldn't have any power to restrict that in any way.
you have to figure out how they're gonna get across the public street or across the right-of-way or across public property, because the section B prohibits operation on.
Any city property, I
on
get it.
city
right.
property.
But in the fable I just created, if it was all, just to set the example, if it was all private, other than ours, we wouldn't be able to control it.
Tunnels and bridges, and it would work perfectly.
Okay. Skyways.
Mayor Tone?
To follow up on what your comments were, Hendrickson, I think that's kind of been the question that's been bouncing around my head the last couple months. Is the ordinance that we have in place, what does it actually accomplish? I would say it doesn't accomplish what everybody wants it to accomplish. And going back before we had an actual ordinance, the map that you have at your desks, these trails, from my understanding, have existed for over 20 years. They are trails in the city of Columbus, and we had no ordinance, and we had no complaints, from my understanding. These, lie on mostly private property, so I think that's what the Snowmobile Club does, is they're connecting trail from one property owner to another. However, when you get into a municipality, it's the intercity trail that they're looking for to get them across a certain section where they don't have that permission from private landowners. So I'm trying to find some combination of keeping the gas, food, lodging option available for them, because that seems to be really what they want here, without having the intercity trail to allow them to go to those areas. However, this trail does cross streets. There's never been, this hasn't been submitted to us for approval through any ordinance. It's just been kind of this is good enough, it's always worked, but we're not really memorializing or recognizing it through any ordinance in the city. So I think that's kind of the crux of, should we be in the business of regulating snowmobiles or not? Because it doesn't seem like we had much success with it in the last 4 years. It's the right of access issue that's the center of what we should be doing if we're going to have an ordinance. So,
Andy, did you have something, or?
Sure. So when I look at this new ordinance, I don't, and then I look at this map, what's been happening for 25 years, I don't see how I can support this if we're going to want to support, if I want to support this.
You can't.
Right.
So,
You can't.
right. So I don't, unless we fix this that allows them right of access, then I don't know where we're at. And I mean, I don't want to move forward with this without that.
I think one thing to remember too, Andy, is this was never a city-created thing.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody would like to bring forth a new idea, a new plan, I would be in consideration of it at this point. I like this draft ordinance that's in front of us right now. I'm not in favor of snowmobiles on the city streets. I mean, the county closes its trail down at 8 inches, and that's going over dirt and corn. Jake and the guys at DPW did a great job of clearing the snow off our streets. So then those snowmobiles are running on asphalt that's not treated, and those carbide tips are going to tear up our streets. No one's going to convince me otherwise from what I've read on my own and the significant time I put into this issue last fall. So that's my 2 cents, Mr. Kenny.
I just to make sure we aren't getting lost in the two issues. The one is trail and the ordinance, and another is the right of access. There's 2 points here. Because this ordinance we have in front of us, draft language, basically satisfies what this map is, minus the fact that we have across it commercial and Maple. Which, I mean, then gets into the question of, do we throw in a subsection to Part B to clarify locations we're crossing? Because if we can isolate locations to one area, then we can address issues with carbide tips on asphalt or concrete, and obviously then we go down the path of regulation and stuff like that. But that seems to be, if we want to keep this happening, which has happened for a long time, and just kind of memorialize it in an actual ordinance with a little bit of tweaking, that's what we do. Then we get into the different conversation of right of access, which is still out there right now, since we didn't repeal it. Just to make sure we don't get lost in forest for the trees of the conversation.
Right, so I think what Paul has done here for us is given us the most restrictive we are, and then asked us to suggest how we would want to broaden it, just so that we're starting off on a point of the least, or the most restrictive, which is, you know, the good way to start, I guess, because we're talking about granting specific, or discussing specific rights to either access to county trail or businesses or what have you. And we can go that route, or we could discuss, you know, a trail that would be memorialized permanently in the ordinance that might reflect something like this. All of those are tweaks we can make starting at this point. So personally, I would want to see a right of access to county trails. I think that's important. I understand there's enforcement issues, but I feel like residents who are going through this, who are here tonight, who are paying attention to this issue, I have faith that they'll be respectful and communicate with their club members about that. So I do feel like a right of access to county trails is important. I'm not giving up completely on the idea of the local clubs coming to us with proposed plans. However, we need to learn from our mistakes on those, make sure you have all the permissions that are documented. And I would highly recommend, if we entertain something like that again, now or in the future, that the club comes with alternative plans. Something like asking for everything they want, plus maybe asking for a little bit less. And that certainly needs to happen before October.
Mayor Tone.
Looking at the draft ordinance that's provided, as you said, it's the framework for the most basic, and building from there. Provided that we're going to go 98.186 subsection C, no person may operate a snowmobile on private land between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. kind of replaces that time restriction that was repealed. The sentence above that, provided that the operator has the consent of the landowner. I think an issue we had before was if there's verbal consent and then the city's kind of getting in between that, and I think there's been some perception or miscommunication of what we are granting as a city, because we cannot grant that access to private land, that there would be something that would be issued in writing or an annual review to make sure that we're not condoning a trail that might be going through private property and there may not be permission there. So then to go back to 714-15, snowmobiles may be operated in the city on a marked snowmobile route. Here we go. We could have done this 4 years ago. There's a route. Can't you say that they are not prohibited except for the trail, and then you specify the trail? It literally only crosses the street or city street 3 or 4 times. It's crossing the road. It's not driving on the road. I have no problem with that type of activity, and it seems like it hasn't created problems up there. So I think that's a reasonable starting point if we need to get something on the books this winter.
Andy?
I actually had a question for someone from the club, I think. Do you have issues, like you can't drive on a state highway, but you have to obviously cross 16 and 60 and throughout your, and maybe other highways throughout your trail. Does the state restrict what you can do with that? Or?
As long as we're going directly across, and then if you're running parallel to it, you have to be 50 feet off the center line if you're riding the ditch line.
Okay. 50 feet from the center, okay.
Matt?
Okay, so jumping off of Regan's conversation, I guess we're gonna go down that path. So I guess for right of access aspect, if residents are required after a snowfall to, if I go out and shovel my sidewalk, so I got front yard, back of walk is now city, and I shovel that, we got the terrace, and I got a couple trees in my terrace, and then you guys come through and you plow out the street. I guess for right of access purpose, if I'm at my house over on Birdsey and I want to get to, let's say, the trail up there to hop on by Quick Trip, where would I ride? To go the shortest distance, I hop on my sled, I pull out of my driveway, then how do I get from my driveway to Quick Trip?
If you're on South Bursey, you would run down Burgess Street to Dick Street, and then you would get on actually you can't go to that trail because that is not the closest trail to your house.
Okay.
The closest trail to your house would be the second option that comes in on it would be the northwest side of town,
Over at,
right by the care center.
okay. So I guess,
You just can't pick and choose which trail
Yeah.
you want to go to. You
Yeah.
have to directly go to the nearest trail, period.
okay, so I've picked my nearest trail.
Yep.
Now, where am I on the street?
You are on the extreme right shoulder, or off, right on the curb line.
Okay. But it's still technically on the street
Yep,
that was just plowed.
correct.
Okay. I'm trying to hit a point here that, if we're gonna do right of access, and I understand the desire of the club to allow people to get from their house out to a trailhead and, on the outskirts of town. The concern we have on this right here is, crossing Maple, crossing, Commercial Drive. At the end of the day, if we're gonna plow the streets and we're gonna make people plow their sidewalks, it turns into a terrace. And most terraces are full of trees or other things. I guess, where are they going to drive on that's not gonna cause damage to city property? And it may be a minute amount, but we know that we're chasing maintenance issues on a lot of our streets. We're doing a lot of street building. We're doing all aspects of that. And it's not a lot. It might not be a lot, but it's every little bit adds up, I guess, over time. And how does that, I guess, how does that sit? Are we gonna go from $75,000 in maintenance to $100,000? And part of that being specifically just for going back through and making repairs on right of access snowmobile areas? I guess that's my big sticking point. And looking at this, I guess the other question I have, thank you, Jake. The question I have for you, Paul, is if we have a map like this that's provided from them, and we have, let's say, as part of the ordinance, we say, we want to see copies of some handwritten letter or a form filled out that says property owner A, B, C, and D on that stretch has given you all access. Can we ask for a copy of that information, and we have it on record so that it's not a handshake or a back of napkin, agreement, whatever you all have on your end. I don't know what they do, but if we see all that stuff, is that something that could be requested in the ordinance and then kind of kept on file, that at least we know for sure that they do have access for the trails themselves?
Right.
And we could say, this is the trail, and we know the exact locations of the crossings to get out along Maple and across Commercial, or out there by the West Travel Center, or out, I think, to the Mullins, one that comes along. So if
To Rotary Park.
we can be aware of where all of them go.
When the idea of the trail was started back in 2013 or whenever it was, Jake and, was it Dave?
Yep.
Yeah. Jake and Dave came in and they gave several reports as to, here's who we talked to, they've given us permission. There wasn't anything in writing at the time, but my guess is that if they've already talked to the property owner, getting them to sign something would not be a big impediment to anything. And if the city wanted that as part of this, it's just basically asking for verification is all that you're doing. So that wouldn't be, that's probably one of the easier things that can be accomplished here, because they have to do that to go across anybody's property, right?
Correct.
Which they have to acquire, but we don't ever necessarily see unless we ask for it.
Right.
And it's on their volition whether they want to actually provide that information to us.
That is correct, but if the city needed verification, that's probably not a hard thing.
I guess at the end of the day, a lot of this is running in private property. It falls in line with what we have for our draft ordinance information. But at the end of the day, I think right of access for town, anywhere to get to your trailhead is going to lead to bring us right back around to where we were initially with is some sort of issues. And like we talked about, at the meeting, I'm sure 99% of the people in the club are great people. 100% of people are great people. Or maybe somebody from out of town coming in who's visiting and stays at Super 8 and causes problem. But at the end of the day, I don't see any way to shift the responsibility from the city onto you guys without saying anytime we find damage, it's $1,000 fine, built into the ordinance. And that's going to kill you guys.
That's not gonna happen.
And it's not going to happen anyway. I mean, there's no way to drive.
That's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to protect us, I guess, from this.
No, that's not possible at all, and the big issue with residential access, and as the ordinance is currently drafted, you can read it and it's very plain. Snowmobiles may be operated on public streets for the purpose of residential access. So if a snowmobiler is at their home, they are basically, by rule, gonna go down a public street on the far right-hand side, but they're gonna be using public streets to get to wherever the nearest trailhead is. And there's really no way to get around that, short of going back and trying to create a public trail that winds through the city, which has not been successful so far.
Because the only way it really boils down to is that literally every street in town would have to have a section of the road that is not plowed, basically creating a subsect trail to get anybody from any house to, well,
I've done it for 4 years already, and I never had to use the city trail to get to the nearest point. My nearest point was always the one by the care center, and that would cause me to travel 5 blocks.
going down public street
On the
though,
extreme right.
on the plowed part,
Yep.
yeah, it's,
And then to play devil's advocate, just because our plows are carbide tipped,
Mm-hmm.
so they do the. a
But they
fair
go
amount-
continuously across, right? They don't chew up as they go, or,
Well,
because there's carbide tips on the track too, right?
just a
But there
minute
is.
pinpoint. It's not a full 10-foot.
Right. But this state takes
No, I
significant
get it.
resources
No,
in preparing the surfaces up north, where this is a real tourism impact.
Right,
We
but
don't
you're
do
talking
that
also
here.
thousands of sleds. This, with right of access, you're talking a handful of people that are gonna be able to utilize this.
That might work to my point too, which is what problem am I solving if I'm dealing with like 0.0001% of the city's population?
I feel it's,
You think you said last year, I think you told me 54 registered and licensed snowmobiles in this city of 5,100 people.
we have over 150 members total.
Right,
and
but we're
over-
talking sleds, not people.
Correct. I just feel that they have a voice too, and they want to be heard.
Oh, they do. I'm hearing them.
No, I get it. That's great. That's what we were shooting for. Opinion, one way or the other. That's what we're hoping. That starts communication.
I don't have a problem with getting access to folks to private land, to get folks to Quick Trip, different gas stations and stuff. I really don't like the residential access aspect of it. I've been straightforward with everybody in this room on that point and not changing my position here. I like this ordinance. Rob?
I just gotta say, just let's remember that we're talking an average of 13 days a year. You know, this isn't a 3-month type thing. We aren't way up north. This is only less than a couple of weeks.
Maybe.
Any other thoughts or questions on the issue? I mean, again, I think it stands that if we did this, it opens it up for you guys to come back and say, hey, I've got an agreement with this private property or this private property owner. Will you let us cross one street here, that kind of thing? I can get by with, or I can even acquiesce to allowing a cross traffic. I really am concerned about sleds going up and down. And to your point, I work for a snow and ice control company, and we're actually looking to invest in some coverage for our blade tips so that we don't damage asphalt and
Oh,
concrete
it's
for
a big
private
problem.
property owners. Thank you.
I think Matt was on first.
I guess what, we already had language in the previous ordinance. I'm losing track of which one, which had which language, that brought up this. I guess to get some sort of clarification as to what they're looking for, like this, a submittal, is it possible in an ordinance to have, I guess, point of information question, is it possible in an ordinance to say Exhibit A?
Well,
Or exhibit B?
basically, if you're looking at this map and you're looking at quote-unquote approving this map, you're going right back to the language of paragraph 98-187B2. That is still on the books, by the way, that says snowmobiles may be operated in the city on a marked route. The Common Council designates a route at the second meeting of October every year. Here's the route, we designate this to be the official route, thank you very much. And you're now done. As far as giving them access to the Columbus West Travel Center and to the trailhead on Industrial Drive with the 5 crossings of municipal streets in order to get there. You've just adopted this map and they have access into the city.
Based
There's-
off of this exhibit, and then
Based
we have
on
to
that
then
exhibit.
subsequently allow the crossings of.
Yep, you approve that
Maple
map
between
and
the-
you're consenting to six, sorry, total of 6 crossings of municipally owned, well, that's not a right way to put it.
Yeah.
Of-
Some
of
number of streets in
Municipal
town.
streets.
Would we have to specifically allow a
Oh,
full-blown,
okay, then it's only 5 then.
would
I
it,
thought that
would it
was a
have to
street
be
as well.
a complete okaying, or could we actually narrow it down to?
Oh, God. Excuse me?
I think we're
I forgot about
going down
that.
the rabbit hole. If we okay to map, would we then also need language in the ordinance to make it okay to be on the street, or would by okaying a map, approving a map, it would subsequently allow those I guess I'm trying to hash out what the language would look like.
Depends on where you put it, because if you already have certain language in place that, in all honesty, if you approve this map, well, you can't do it now.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
As-
If you approve
assuming
this
the-
map tonight, you'd be
Yeah.
done.
I guess my questions are framed in the idea of all the ordinances having been repealed in the previous meeting.
Right.
We're starting fresh, because I would assume that we're gonna repeal the ordinance we didn't repeal to come back with new stuff, because we can't bring in, or replace it, whatever kind of thing. So assuming this is new language to come in
Right.
on.
Well, okay, so what's your question? Because the language to address this map is already on the books, and it can be repealed and taken out and put into this new ordinance very easily.
Okay.
That would not be a problem at all. The only thing you have to deal with there is, you have October in the existing ordinance, you had March in the one that was already repealed. Neither one of those days seem to make a whole lot of sense when you really think about it, but that's where we were.
To make it even more confusing, the language that you're talking about where we could basically just adopt this, that's what we repealed tonight.
No.
714-15, number 2.
No, because you didn't repeal 695-13, which is still there.
It was the unamended version of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, yes, the one that you repealed had the March review date.
Correct.
This now has the October review date.
And the time
which is
restriction.
actually the meeting that is scheduled for tonight.
Yeah.
So,
With this map, one question I have for you, Jake, is since this hasn't really been part of what we've been talking about the last 4 years, I have seen snowmobiles out here at Quick Trip past 10 o'clock. Is that a concern?
Past 10 o'clock?
Yes.
That is, I mean, if you need fuel and you're out riding at 11 or later at night, that was our option to get fuel.
Okay. I mean, this isn't a residential area.
Right.
This is commercial, this is, ag land,
It's
whatever.
used to heavier,
Yeah.
later
so
traffic.
I don't have a problem with that, but I think you kind of have to parse what you're going to do in the city and what you're going to do in this area. I support this because I think it's conducive to snowmobiling, and it always has been. But I think it just needs to be a part of the ordinance. You have to have, the language like it's stated in what we repealed. This could be their marked snowmobile route. There isn't any reason that you couldn't try to find spurs to come off of here to generate more residential access points, since we don't have the intercity trail. I feel like since we lost the intercity trail after last year, that's gonna create more difficulties for people that are in certain parts of town to get out to a trail spur. Is it gonna be close enough? Are they gonna know where to go? And I think this is a good starting point, that we need to try to approve this and then try to grow from here moving forward. That's my 2 cents. I think the difference, I don't like the residential access for the same reasons you guys have stated, and I've said that for years. I think there's a difference between allowing snowmobiles to cross roads rather than driving on them. I think that driving on them creates safety issues. I don't know that we should allow snowmobiles to travel on the state highway as it comes through town. I don't know that maybe we have jurisdiction to allow that, but I'm not certain of that stuff. I'd rather see the trail spurs kind of built out into residential area and call it, reasonable access. But I think calling every city street part of a trail to get you to the trailhead, I'm just not comfortable with that, and I haven't been in the past. But I certainly want to support what has worked in the past. There's no reason to fix something that's not broken, but it's just how we do it in the ordinance.
Regan?
So not surprisingly, feel like this is a bigger discussion we need to continue to have. But in light of the time of year and what we have done tonight, and we do have this as an option, would it be as simple, Paul, as having this brought forward to the next meeting to approve? So at least we have this on the books until we do whatever we do next?
With the framework that you still have in place under the ordinance that's still in place, which is 695-13, that provides that the council designates a route at its second meeting of October. Okay, that's not going to happen. If the council takes no action, the route's the same as last year. You don't have a route the same as last year, so if you designated this as your route at your first meeting of November, it would work for this year.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
how I look at it.
So again, that's what I would like to do so that we as a council and as a community can continue to have this discussion, primarily around residential access to the county trails, but also just if we're going to replace something, I want it to be well thought out and detailed enough, and so that we all know what we're talking about, what the rules are.
The only caveat of the last thing I should have explained is that the residential access is in this ordinance. Right. Okay, just so that we're all clear on
This
that.
ordinance being -13?
Yes.
Okay.
695-13 does allow residential ordinance on public, or residential access on public streets.
So we would continue, obviously, this discussion to deal with your concern about that if what we end up approving takes away the residential access, that's what we end up doing. But for now, at least we have something set up where we can continue to work out these issues.
This map takes care of some of your concerns as far as access to food and fuel and,
Correct.
and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
trail that's been there since I could ever snowmobile.
Right. Mayor Tome?
If we could expand on that a little bit, Jake, thanks for providing this
Yeah.
for the conversation, because this is something that I hadn't really been able to look at. If you could try to get some additional map information to us, I think it's important to have some documentation while we're having this conversation, because the spur that comes in by Mullins, for instance, that's an access point, but it's not in the city of Columbus.
Right.
So we're not regulating that, but that actually, I think people need to see that information, that the trail starts right at the edge of the city. Rotary Park is a great access point for someone to drop their sled and go out for the day if they choose to do so, but also maybe getting a little bit more detail, since this is all within city limits, of where this trail goes and how it enters the city, so we have a better understanding of, you know, how many landowners you have to deal with as development comes towards the city or whatever. I would appreciate just having maybe a
Yeah, I can-
broader view of that.
I can back the range up and
Yeah.
still try to draw as best as I can.
Okay. That would be helpful anyway, just for everybody to acknowledge that. Because this is showing the businesses, but not necessarily showing the trail that we'd be approving to get to those businesses.
And I'm open to any kind of private contract you come up with landowners that gives you access. That's obviously not my point of contention on this whole thing, so to Mike's point, I guess, yeah, if we could get some more detail and stuff. Where does this then go?
That
Does it kind
actually,
of go back through the farmland?
that is on the backside of where the Dean Clinic is. That's where that big drop off is, right next to 151. Then it goes
Okay.
up towards Lycon and then cuts back towards the Cardinal Ale House, and that's what gets to the hotel.
Okay.
That's where it
Then it
stops.
just terminates at Super 8.
Yep.
Okay.
So that part of the trail, you see, got a
You-
10 o'clock curfew?
Excuse me, would you mind just stepping up to the microphone? Then folks who are at home on TV and watching it later on the internet can go ahead and hear your question, sir.
My question is with the 10 o'clock curfew, if there's people riding late at night and they got reservations at the motel, they want to get to the motel and it's past 10 o'clock, is that going to create an issue being on them trails on the outskirts of town? Getting fuel, or, because sometimes, depending on the weather and how things are going, if you got a full moon and stuff, it's actually beautiful out riding a snowmobile in the middle of the night. You ride all night long sometimes, and if you need fuel,
Yeah.
you can't just automatically stop at 10 o'clock, because it just depends where you're coming from or going to. So that's my concern is, the actual curfew part on the outskirts. I can understand it in the city of Columbus,
Right.
but on the outskirts like that, where you're going like to a motel or wherever, that's,
I'd say I'm open to looking at a curfew if we had an established map that we were kind of considering for sure to know that snowmobile traffic beyond 10 p.m. would be isolated to certain outlying areas of town, which is your point, which, I'd be amenable to discussing that for sure.
thank you.
Mr. Kenny?
She's
Sorry,
got
guys.
10 here.
I just wanted to add one thing, just because I won't be able to attend the next meeting because I'm moving back to Iowa for grad school. I just want you guys to consider one thing. If all of us are here and we have a club and an organization that goes through all of this work every single year, we contact the landowners every single year, we put those trail markers in every single year, we still thank those landowners every single year, we're going to convention to build our club, we're going to workshops to learn new things every single year. And there's been years we've never been able to snowmobile, but yet every single year we go through this work. If we're willing to come here in front of you guys and give our time and our effort to get business or access to our local businesses, you need to consider that. There's members in this community who live in town who are putting in this work also. So if they can't get into or out to their trail, like, they're putting in that work for what then? I just want that to be considered, just because it's the most disappointing thing when you go through all this work and we can't snowmobile. But we live in Wisconsin and there's nothing else we can do, but yet we still do it every single year. So I really thank you guys so much for all your time, and I just needed to say this before, have this be in the back of your mind. I know this is going to get brought up to discussion, and unfortunately I won't be able to be in attendance, but so thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Kenny?
So just to clarify, Paul, I think that still in 69516, there are hours still in here. So
well-
we did repeal it in
No.
714.
To address the last gentleman's question, the ordinance that you currently have in place says no person may operate a snowmobile between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. except on an open approved trail. So you approve this trail,
Oh, good point.
everything in red is now fair game 24/7.
So then we can bring back, by doing that, we can bring back the actual time.
And given the location of that suggested trail, I could be, like I said, I could be agreeable to that kind of thing
Now-
because of the
Having
separation from residents.
And having said that, perfect segue. Having said that, you may want to consider deleting the second part of that sentence because it says a city-approved route for the purpose of gaining access, which would then allow the residential access at 24/7 as well, which you probably don't want to do.
So limit it to the trail is,
Right. So
As
you might
approved.
wanna delete the second part of that sentence and leave the first part in place so that the trail is open 24/7 to get to Quick Trip, the hotel, and on your area, but you can't do the residential access after 10 p.m.
and you're referring to 695-13?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Top of page 3. So I think what I hear the council saying is that the ordinance that's already on the books, 695-13, actually works to achieve this trail, if this is what you're comfortable with, actually works to eliminate the 10 p.m. curfew on the trail, gives residential access from a home to the nearest trailhead, and then really the only sticking point is just that last thing that we talked about relevant hours of operation for residential access purposes. So basically, you have everything in place for this map, if that's where you're heading,
But that map would need to be brought forward to the next regular meeting, correct?
for approval. That's correct.
Matt?
And that carries forward the right of access to allow use of any public street.
Well,
That is
in
on
the
the books,
city.
that's on the books right now.
in the
It's on
book,
there
and
now.
that would stay on the books.
right, but I would think we could bring it forward with a map and a minor edit to take care of that part and do all of that in 2 weeks.
I just make sure that,
Yeah.
that point doesn't get lost in the
Right.
conversations. At the end of the day, I have to be a no on right of access, just from the way it is. And I think that Reagan seems to be on board with this too, and that if we're gonna go forward with this conversation and do get a map to make sure that we also see the option of separating that part out of this. And we could approve a map, have time, a lot of it's allowed, but take that part out just because of the issues that have been brought up.
Well, I think we could probably ask Attorney Johnson to make that minor edit as a suggested edit and have it in the packet for approval, and if not, we could make the motion reflect what it is that you want.
Well, yeah, we could, I guess,
That would
with
be it.
consensus on this, because I think there's two people who have voiced this, but I don't know what everybody else is.
Attorney Johnson, if we went through with this map that we're all looking at, what does that do for the ordinance you've drafted and put before us for this agenda item, 186? Was that moot at this point, and we would just leave 695-13 on the books, bring forth a map on November 1? November 7th, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would not, trying to work with this map works much better with the ordinance that's already on the books than trying to shoehorn it into what we were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation.
Thank you for that clarification. Mayor Tome?
The one thing that I think is worth salvaging out of the drafted ordinance, Paul, would be, it's 981-186, subsection C, provided that the operator has the consent of the landowner. I think we need to get that language into the current ordinance, and that we don't have that in there right now, especially if we're recognizing this map, which is mostly private landowners, to draw the difference between what the city's allowing and what private landowners are allowing. So I think
Right.
just getting that entry into the existing ordinance is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have no interest in controlling people's use of private land, so that jives with my
Hard
own
to do.
philosophy. Regan?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I mean, I envision this as the Band-Aid to get us through this year. Reagan, to your question about, is this a moot point, this ordinance that Paul drafted for tonight? I don't think it is. I think we continue to have that discussion. But this is one way to get something on the books for this year for both the city and the club, and continue to work on these issues. I don't have a problem starting from this starting point and then granting exactly the access and the rights that we want to.
I just have one comment. Over the past 4 years, I know it hasn't been smooth. And last year was kind of the biggest black eye for us. But also the same for right of access. That really never happened anywhere else. It was just on the trail itself. And I can't say, none of us can say that it was or wasn't a citizen. And I feel that, me, myself, I take pride in this town. I know what you should and shouldn't be doing to other people's property because I wouldn't want it to be done to my property. And I have a feeling that a lot of people would have the same feeling towards everybody else that are going to be using that privilege. And we know it's a privilege. And that's about it.
I think you guys are respectable operators of your machines. I think you guys, as you said before, ma'am, your dedication to your club and the efforts you guys put forward to figure this out every year and get your private use contracts all situated. My sticking point's never been the handful of folks that might have violated our law. Mine are on the record, but I just want to get on the record and say I think you guys are going to be respectable operators. I don't see that's not really my issue with
Well, we appreciate
the
that.
residential access part. So, Mayor Tone.
It's not my intent to further or over-regulate snowmobiles. I'm trying to get us out of the business of doing that, but one thought I've had in the last couple weeks was kind of A few thoughts we had on the golf cart discussion and chicken ordinance and everything else is if we know how many snowmobiles we have in town that are residents that wish to gain access to a trail, maybe it's something, a simple process of documenting them, and they know where the trailhead is, and they get a sticker for $10 and they've got permission to access those roads. But then you have some control over that. Otherwise, we really don't know who's in town. And when everything kind of ended badly last year, technically the only thing that should have been happening would have been right of access at that point because the trail was closed. So it was really hard to determine whether this was done from somebody from outside of town, somebody from inside of town, a club member, not a club member, and that's just all hearsay. So I think if we're gonna look at right of access, maybe that's part of the conversation, is just having a simple process laid out there so we know that it is for residents and they're going inward and outward, and that we don't have just a bunch of traffic coming through town wherever they'd like to go. So I've been thinking about it at least. So thanks, Jake.
Andy?
I appreciate it.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up because I had been thinking about something similar to that myself, and I could get behind something like that.
I don't have confidence we're gonna get that done this year, though.
Sure,
But
right.
I think,
And plus, I think it also allows other club members like Jake or these guys out here, if they are riding through town and they see someone that doesn't have the sticker, they can talk to them. And if they're not on board with this, he's a resident, he can call the police department and have that dealt with. So I could get behind something like that for the future, absolutely.
As of right now, we have to purchase a trail pass just to ride on the trails, period. So it wouldn't be another issue that if we had to get another trail pass or something like that, like you said, get documentation of this is who he is, this is his registration number. I mean, even you could make it something that's very legible that would be on both sides of the sleds, like our registration stickers, that if there is a problem, somebody could say, well, I saw sled number 22, and it would pinpoint really quick, I would think. At least
Or no sled number, and then we know it's
Right.
nobody from our community.
it'd also give an opportunity, I think, to educate if it's not a club member and they apply for a permit, then they can identify where their local access point is or the shortest route to get there, that they're not discovering it on their
Correct.
own, so to speak.
Well, I'm not sure where we're at as far as consensus on bringing this forward. I think we're on a consensus with the map and leaving 69513 and leaving it open to bringing back the draft that Paul's presented us tonight. Does that seem to comport with everyone's understanding up here?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to come forward on November 7th with that map to be presented, correct?
Do you want an ordinance to make 2 minor modifications to 695-13, modification number 1, removing the post 10 p.m. residential access, and number 2, adding the clause about snowmobile on private land must have consent to the landowner at all times? So do a very short tweak to what's on the books already, approve your map, you're good for this year. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Yeah. I think so. It gets us on a good start, so.
Okay.
All right.
You'll have it.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Jake, for all your efforts and for you folks showing up and sharing your opinions. And we can move on to item number, where am I at? 7. All right, discussion of application fee and license for the permit to harbor chickens in the city of Columbus. Find myself here.
What you have before you here is, a couple of years ago, you adopted a chicken harboring ordinance, and there is a 2-part fee that has never been established by the council. We have the first ever application for a chicken harboring license coming to you in short order. So it would be a really good idea for the council to establish the fee both for the application and for the annual license. In a situation like this, the ordinance as currently drafted provides that a person applies for a license and pays a non-refundable fee. And that non-refundable fee is used to defray clerk time and building inspector time, because one of the provisions of the ordinance is that the building inspector goes out, checks out the coop, checks out the run, checks out the neighbor, writes a report, because that's part of what you have to evaluate as to whether or not the license should be granted in the first place. So, and I think Patrick had some information in your packet about, here's the fee for the building inspector on an hourly rate. I think I said that the application fee is generally non-refundable. And then, so I would suggest making that fee high enough to cover your costs. And then the annual license fee can be whatever you like, and that's just something that they pay for annually. And I don't think that you have to go through the application process every year. I think that's a one-shot deal.
Paul, one point of clarification under subsection C, license required, sub 2, the end of that paragraph says, if the license is not granted to the applicant, this fee shall be returned to the applicant. So it is refundable if it's not
No, that
approved.
is, no.
Shall be non-refundable.
At the time of the
The
person
license is
requesting
different
shall
than
post a
application,
fee.
so-
No, that's the two-part, because there's the application fee, and then they also are posting the fee for the license.
Okay.
And the application fee is not refundable. If they don't get the license, that part is refundable. So basically, give me all your money, and then if we give you the license, we're gonna keep it, and if we don't, we're gonna give you a little bit back. That's how your ordinance reads right now.
So we're still covering the cost of the building inspector and those things that we don't get refunded.
It would certainly be my recommendation that you do that.
Andy?
My question is, you had brought up the fact that they would never, that this would be just, the inspector will go out once. I guess maybe this is not the right time for this, but I'm gonna ask this anyway. What happens in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, the structure is dilapidated and
I think this
rotting?
is the perfect time for that.
Okay, well, it doesn't, the agenda is, it says, talks about fees, so.
Right.
That's why I was questioning it, but, I would be curious to see if we could work something in, or there's a,
It's already there.
okay.
Well, it doesn't say it as clearly as what you just said, Andy.
Okay.
But if you look at paragraph D, this is similar to an alcohol license. Once you get it, you have it, and it can be revoked for reasons. Right, so if you're walking through the neighborhood and you see a coop that's dilapidated and is no longer suitable, you can file a complaint, it comes back here, and then would be some due process rights to the license holder, and there'd be a hearing and all that good stuff like that.
Matt?
When I first read this, I guess a couple points jumped out at me. One, I think if somebody's gonna have chickens, their intent is to probably have all natural eggs and have chickens, not to buy eggs. And the difference between organic eggs versus regular eggs is $1 or $2. You're looking at, $100 for your initial application fee and then a recurring cost of $100 a year. I mean, I think we're basically financially driving anybody from actually going through this process. It's been 2 years since this was adopted. We now have one. I think you mentioned that there was a couple that have submitted applications but no follow-through, probably because they found out that the cost would be to submit the application and to pay the yearly fee for this, to have 4 chickens in your backyard. I don't care how much those hens are laying eggs, you're not making up $150 worth of savings on this.
Remember, that's only a one-time fee. Your application fee is a one-time.
Yeah,
fee.
yeah, but so I mean, year one, you're $150 into your chickens, let alone the coop, the feed, you know, et cetera,
True.
et cetera, et cetera. You're buying, I mean, that's my first question. And two, we're paying a building inspector to look at a chicken coop.
That's,
I guess I'm flabbergasted a little bit on that idea. I
Somebody
mean,
has
maybe
to
I'm
look
stepping
at
on
it.
toes here. You guys already hashed this out before, but I'm looking up
We were hearing
a quick search. Madison, I think they somebody pays $10 for a fee, and they have chickens, 4 chickens. I guess the question is, as part of the application process, couldn't they just submit pictures of their coop, and then if it's not a rundown shack in the woods, it probably would work fine to allow chicken coops to work. I mean, even rundown shack would probably work good for the chickens. I guess that this is. I just want to make sure that everybody's kosher with as it is before we start jumping into fees, because my initial thought is that this is, if we're gonna not try to overregulate snowmobiles, we're overregulating chickens. It seems like we're kind of picking the wrong point here. So is this an appropriate time for conversation about the ordinance as is? Question mark, hypothetical to everybody on the council? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I know, the pricing.
Yeah.
Regan,
So first, I feel kind of responsible. It's been 2 years since this has happened, because actually when I found out this passed, I came right in and talked to Ann, and I had my coop and I was ready to go. And then I realized, oh, we don't know how much to pay, and then I kind of got busy. But anyway, that aside, to kind of address some of what Matt's bringing up, I thought the building inspector piece of this was because of the set-off rules, the setbacks, which is a lot more tricky than just assessing if the coop is
Built.
uninhabitable. And ultimately, it's why I decided not to go forward with mine too, is because I didn't think I'd make the clearance. And so I think that is important because we have a neighbor aspect to this ordinance. The neighbors are allowed to give input because it can be seen as a nuisance, I guess, to some people. And I think you're undervaluing the hobby aspect and the fun aspect of having chickens in your backyard. So I don't find the cost to be a deterrent. I guess we could also look at other local cities that have similar ordinances, which I'm sure we did when we drafted this, to see what they're charging, to kind of assess that. But in general, I'm in favor of chickens in Columbus, so I think setting the fee would be good to do, so people know what they're looking at.
Andy.
yeah, so I'm sitting here thinking, you have a building inspector. Regan brings up a good point, we need to check the setbacks. I don't see that process taking more than 15 minutes. We're charging $85 an hour, so you're in it for, $21.25. So set the fee at $25, limit his time to 15 minutes, and move on.
Trina.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to jump in that I really still don't see building inspectors being required even to measure out the setback. I feel like if there's a complaint, someone can go and check on the setback and see if it's been met. It's just so much money up front. I feel like you're charging as much as the building of the coop itself for looking at the coop.
I guess I'm more on the same page as Regan on this, which I think the setbacks are probably important, because for a bad joke here, if you wait till after the chickens have hatched, well, they've hatched.
Thanks, Rod.
Hey, Rod wasn't here last time. I'm making up for the levity. Anyway, Mayor Tome.
I guess it's been a while since I've read this ordinance, but it's certainly, I think that once we set this fee, we will probably stop seeing permits for chickens. That's if it's cost prohibitive, there are people that have had chickens in town that didn't come in and apply for a license yet. So I think if we want people to comply with the regulation, it needs to be cost effective. To a certain degree. I think the way that the ordinance is written as well, the first first line of the ordinance is that the keeping of chickens within the city of Columbus may detract from and may be detrimental to healthful and comfortable life in the city. That paints a pretty grim picture. I don't know how many other ordinances start off that way, like the snowmobile ordinance maybe.
It's just foul.
It is. So, and if you have such a stringent upfront
Really, Paul? Really?
process with a building inspector and, a distance from your neighbors, I understand all that. However, if you get chickens in your backyard, you didn't go through any of the process, and the neighbor complains, you're gonna have to go through the process, and it's gonna go a little quicker. So it seems like we're kind of driving at this from both ends. There's the license revocation, and then there's the upfront application process. So it seems like it's very burdensome, and are we gonna draw anybody in to get an application? Or are we just pushing people further away if the cost is too high? And I don't want to rewrite this ordinance, I'm done.
Matt?
I agree. You apparently are a chicken enthusiast, Regan, and you were a hobbyist. Do you feel like that in your hobby and enthusiasm for a chicken that you're going to plop your coop at 22.5 feet and tell your neighbor to go pound sand? I would assume if your people's going to put in a chicken coop, they're probably going to be reasonable and responsible. And I remember asking a question about raised beds and other things, and I asked Ann before, and she gave me there's if you put up a fence or X, Y, and Z or blah, 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 then it's different for sheds versus garage. It's a whole lot of in there. And I think one of them was, if you have a raised bed, it has to be, a foot off of your lot line because you have to be able to walk behind it to maintain it without trespassing onto private property. Does the building inspector show up and make sure that my raised bed is a foot off my lot line? I guess I think a lot of this can be captured in the initial application, and I think that $150 initially a year and then a recurring cost of dollars. And if you have chickens, you're a horrible person. The first line that's in here, it really drives everybody away. And if we're going to be open to bringing people in and having happy chicken love in our city, I guess it's just hard to. Maybe it's an initial fee, but I said Madison has $10 for this. I think it's a one-time fee, and then you have your chickens, and people have no problems complaining about everything else that their neighbors are doing if they have a shoddy garage or whatever it may be. So we can add it to a list of things that people can bring up, and then we can send somebody out. But I think what you're going to get is that minimal 1 hour charge from building inspector that a lot of people tend to do is, well, if I'm going to go over there, my plumber comes out to look at my toilet and goes, yep, your toilet's broke. Well, there's a 1 hour charge. So I don't know if we're going to get the $21 prorated fee from whomever it may be doing the inspection. So
Good point. I thought of the same thing.
yeah, Davis could drive by and go, yeah, that's about 25 feet, and then we're done. This is, I guess.
Paul?
And Trina did make a good point a few minutes ago, because the building inspector is not required here.
Yeah.
We assumed it would be the building inspector because it's not gonna be me. And it's not gonna be Patrick, and probably not Pat either.
Yeah, it was in the initial blurb of talking about the building inspector. I just make sure we didn't start going down that path and start adding that in, because I think that's.
Right, I mean, if DPW wants to do it, or if you wanna just let everybody go on the honor system, and then you have this language in here for if there's a complaint, then you can go out and check if it's 25 feet or whatever, you can do it that way too, and that defrays the cost considerably.
Because, I can think, at least on my street with 8 residents, including myself, one might have a 25-foot offset from any neighboring issue. I think we're not going to have a lot of people who are going to have that space. It's going to be more of your peripheral area around the city, or some parts that have a little more of a backyard. So I just don't think it's going to be as big of an issue.
I did ask a clarifying question at the time, because 25 feet from a residential structure, I felt probably,
Is it a garage?
if we were
or
including garages,
shed
nobody
or-
could have chickens.
Yeah.
It's a house.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that might need to be clarified anyways as well. I think Paul has a lot of writing to do.
Ann.
I think this is perfect.
Trina?
Oh, no new real point. I was just picturing as being more like $25 for the initial fee. Them sending in their drawings if they don't have photographs, with the measurements on their drawings, to be approved by someone within the city staff for a quick drive-by look, for a very reasonable cost. And then maybe a $15 annual, just in case there's further expenses.
I guess I would maybe make a suggestion at this point, which is maybe some of us could put a little wish list of some ideas to see in front of us, and we could table this and bring it back to the next cow, because I don't think there's a tremendous time pressure on it, and we're staring down 9 o'clock at this point in the evening with a fair heavy agenda in front of us.
I think there is an impending.
Well, I forgot you do have an application on file. Well, I kept talking, everybody's talking when no one's ever applied, and
We do have an application that's been formally filed, although the application was rather thin, but it was filed nonetheless.
when was it filed?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, and I did bring that with me. Was that last week?
Well, I was just gonna ask, we can set fees, discuss it more and figure out what we wanna do for now, but can't we always change them?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
So we
Absolutely.
do it for a year, see if we're, losing money like crazy, and reassess.
So would maybe part of your idea be to drop that fee?
Oh, yeah,
Since you
yeah.
suggested the losing money part, I'm just making that assumption.
No, yeah. I like Trina's idea.
25.
Yep.
25 and 15 is what I heard from Trina.
I hope that's a good amount.
We'll
And so
hold you
25 would be the
responsible.
license and 15 the application fee, or vice versa?
Vice versa.
Okay, 25 to apply for the license and 15 to obtain the license.
Yep.
Mayor Tome?
Under licensing required, subsection 3, upon receipt of an application for a license to house chickens or a subsequent renewal, the city clerk shall notify all residents and landowners within 200 feet of the applicant's address of the application being filed. The application for the license shall be heard by the common council at the first regularly scheduled meeting of the council following a minimum 14-day notification period to the neighborhood residents and landowners. That seems to be a bit much when you already have an application process. No?
Well,
There's an
that's up to you.
Well, it sounds like you're applying for a variance. I mean, you already have the rule that the chickens can't be within a certain distance from the property, and if that's being inspected, you're still also going, and the administrative cost, I think, that are, concerns in the memo, that's the contributor right there. It's not just about the cost of the building inspector, it's about going through and notifying every neighborhood and having a public hearing for a license.
Sending out a bunch of letters.
Yeah.
Well, and the 200 feet was taken from other municipalities, and I gotta believe it's based on the clucking.
Yeah.
That's why there's no roosters.
But there have been roosters in this
That's-
town, I can attest to
Oh, I
that.
Oh, yeah.
4 a.m.
I do think that the fee needs to be conducive to what we're pushing people through, but I'm questioning how many steps are we gonna push them through, because otherwise we're just not gonna get applicants. We're gonna have chickens with no license.
I agree with the fee. I kind of like your idea too, Trina. And as you said, Regan, we can take a flyer on it, and none of this is immutable. We can bring it back whenever we so desire. As far as the 200 feet, being that it was taken from other municipalities, it might not be in Madison's ordinance, but I don't know. I don't really think that that's a bad thing to consider, which is, it's, but do we really consider that if you want a dog? My dog can bark. Yeah. So I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure I want to dig into that, but the license and application fee I like. Matt?
I mean, I guess if we have a canned letter, that goes out to addresses we already know, it would be filling in the name and dropping it off. I feel like Pat, you could probably hammer that out in half an hour.
How many people did you have to notify for this one?
You're going from the edge of the border of the property in all directions, not
Right,
Mhm.
and this
Behind the
current,
backyard.
this current application has 2 lots, so that made the,
So
that made
20
the
might be a
200
little
feet
heavy.
significantly larger.
They were asking for permission for both lots?
No, just one, but we
Oh.
don't know which one.
Hence, it's a little light.
Yes.
Trina?
Oh, I would definitely want to get permission from all abutting properties. I don't know if it needs to be as far as 200 feet. That's quite a distance. And for chickens, they're not that loud. It's roosters whose voices really carry.
Yeah. So little time, really. There's little time. So how do we feel about bringing this forward with the fee of $25 for the application and $15 for the license at this point? And if folks wish to dig into other aspects of the ordinance, we could bring it back at that time. But at least this satisfies, and it sounds like Pat's already done the letters to neighbors, so that's kind of.
You have an application coming very soon,
Mhm.
so.
All right, that's what we'll do. We'll bring this forward with language to change this to a $25 application fee and a $15 licensure. All right?
Oh, we need to subtract the building inspector or find someone in lieu. If we're getting rid of the.
There's no requirement. There's no requirement as currently drafted that somebody go out and physically inspect the property. So really, you have two choices as to how to do this. Number one is designate somebody to do that, or number two is do it passively and say, here's the rules and we're not going to worry about it unless there's a complaint, and then we'll investigate and check. And I mean, I think that's the two completely opposite ways to approach this, but they both are allowed under the ordinance.
Matt?
I could see this being like our liquor licensing, where in that one section liquor license, we lay out very clearly where it is. The one from the crate, we had a map that showed in the application the person submits, if it's a lot, they could say, well, it's gonna be in the back corner of this lot, and, and it's clear from that 25 feet from a structure, they could kind of show where it's gonna be, and I think if it's laid out, do we really need to go out there and measure out to the gnat's ass 25 feet, but I don't think we need to add the building inspector language to an ordinance if we bring to it. But I think, yeah. I don't.
But at this point, you're saying that's our discretion.
Right. It's not in there right
Mhm.
now, so it's however you want to do it.
So I think at this point, the thing I know I have consensus on is $25 application fee and $15 license fee. So that's what we'll address at the next regular meeting on the 7th of November. All right. Thank you very much. Where are we now? Number 8, finally? Dodge County Humane Society, 2018 stray animal contract.
That's prohibited.
Yeah. So our current contract for at least the last couple of years I've been on this body is with Dodge County Humane Society. I think this was brought up in a meeting last week too, where Chief Meister said, I think there's a minimal cost increase. Is that correct, Patrick?
Correct.
And could you explain that?
Sure. So last year, the selection that we made was the lump sum $1,500 to cover 10 domestic stray animals. Animals in excess will be charged $150 of animals over the total of 10. In the proposed 2018, the sum is $1,900, and any animals in excess of 10 would be $225. Now that's the second level of what we chose last year. There is a lower, but that would cover up to only 5.
Do we know how many we had last year?
I believe the chief said we're close.
I think it was 9.
Yeah,
9, okay. So it seems like a good threshold.
that's always been the general area we've zeroed in on over the last few years.
If memory serves from my last couple discussions on this topic in 15 and 16 was we've never in recent history shot past that 10. So it seemed like a good delineator. Andy?
Yeah, I would like to stick with the 10, 1900, the 225 over, if you go over. I mean, if you did 5, you know, you're at 9, it's no brainer.
Mayor Tome?
The other questions, we're only contracting for domestic dogs only. And then the last one, following approval options, what did we normally do that on there?
We select Humane Society must have approval before accepting any animal.
Okay. Thanks.
So we comfortable bringing this forward for a vote next meeting? Sounds good. Everyone can have their say then as well. Number 9, consider uses for DOT CSS grant for State Highway 89 project 2022.
So the conversations with the DOT are picking up on design and plans for Highway 89. That's a project plan for 2022. They are pressing, I guess you could say, the city on how we'd like to utilize the CSS funds on James Street. If you recall, we use those on decorative streetlights. At this point, as I mentioned, there's been an interest in doing streetlights with the black coloring, similar to what we have on James Street. I don't think at this point we've confirmed that as one of our selections. So if I get a consensus or a feel from you about that, I think it would be helpful. But with $47,100, if you went with the black poles, that's about $20,000. That would still leave $27,000, a little over $27,000 to spend on aesthetic corridor enhancements.
How far along that corridor does that amount of money, does it get you all the way to Park Avenue, or does it just go to because we're looking at 89 Farnham, right?
89 is Farnham, yep, from 73 just past Avalon Road.
From 73 past Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
So Park Avenue. Isn't that
Park Avenue would be the other end of the project. Park Avenue being 73.
So we go from Avalon straight through.
Correct.
I just like aesthetic consistency. Matt?
Is there currently running SMFA on this? SMFA, I have the new one, not the SMA, the SMFA. Is there a rough cost right now for city's contribution for parking lanes? I'm assuming that we're opting to replace those because of the fact that there's the schools and the fields, and we're going to assess cost for that.
There is. I can't recall exactly. That's really the only city cost included. We're supposed to be seeing an updated SMA in the coming months. So, you know, like with James Street, they'll have several iterations of the SMA until we get close to the bid.
Okay.
So,
I guess the question being, do we want to spend money on black poles on 89 that's kind of separated from the downtown area? Go with more of a standard street light out there since it's a little more rural of a section, and then B, it's very unsexy, but we're gonna have to pay for parking, and maybe dumping some money to try to offset that parking costs if we're gonna go with that out there to help try to offset costs in general.
and I'm not certain you can do
That's
that.
a question that would be asked, because it's a, I guess no, because it's not the credit stuff. This would actually be relegated to that separate category that's specifically for CSS that falls into just this stuff.
Mm-hmm. There is a
Yeah.
certain list of accepted
Yeah,
items for that.
I think I'm misspeaking. Jason, you're shaking your head at me. Yeah. I'm just trying to get more costs off of our plate and get them out of here, I guess. Yeah, okay. I guess first point question still being appropriate though. Do you want to have a gap between the downtown area and then out to Farnham for black poles?
Rod?
Several years ago, we had a task force that was looking into all these things. I strongly recommend having the black poles for one thing. It makes continuity going down the totality of James Street. And by my count, we needed 4 trash containers for $4,000, 4 benches for $4,000, 6 bike racks, and 3 info signs, which equals about $13,500 if we had to pay for everything. Now, there are manufacturers in town that have said they would donate time and material for some of these things. And they've been itching for the last 3 or 4 months to start doing some of these things. So I think that, and there's 18 decorative street signs we're talking about also, which is another $1,800. And of course, 2 radar speed signs, which keep getting put on the, oh, that's for 89.
Yeah, I was about to ask, I was gonna ask you where you're coming
In
up
that
with
case,
these
I
numbers.
retract my whole thing there. Never mind.
Thank you, Rod. Mayor Tome.
Is the $20,000 estimate, that would be taking the standard lighting system that we would get, which would be a stainless steel pole with like a cobra arm, and we'd be painting the pole black?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Not at the decorative type, but
Okay.
the, kind of like as you're getting further west here on James, those kind, the Cobra,
Okay.
yeah.
And LED lights, standard? Okay. I would be in favor of, maybe if we don't do all the poles black, maybe we kind of, I'd like the continuity idea of trying to incorporate those, even if it's disconnected from downtown. And maybe, Matt, if you don't want to have every pole black, maybe you kind of taper them off at a certain point, or do every
Past the
other,
high school.
Yeah.
something like that. When you get to the edge of town, maybe you don't need them. I'm not real sure, but I do think colored crosswalks would be benefit in that area because of the school, the aquatic center, everything else, and we could have some continuity with the James Street project. So, and I have no idea how you know, how many crosswalks we'd have, but I think we need to have that discussion at the important intersections. But I think like the aquatic center and the school would be a good starter, and also at the intersection of Park and 89. Maybe something when, to delineate the city limits when people come in, because there's, you know, a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit by the golf course when you come into town as well. So that's my thought.
Trina?
Oh, it's just more of a general question, I guess, off of Rod's comments. I'm wondering why there's extra beautification funds for 89 and not 73, which might be more noticeable. I don't know.
For the 73 project that's going on next year, that is not in the same category. It's not a full reconstruction. It's a mill and overlay type of thing, so.
And
this
CSS is gone.
Good question.
Right.
Matt?
I guess is that kind of the intent, is that if and when 73 gets redone, that we try to carry the black poles all the way out of town to at least 89 or continue farther out? Because I mean, yeah, I guess just trying to fill in the whole gap idea. If we do it now in 89, we have to theoretically carry it forward into the future to do it on 73 when we finally get back around to that point.
I feel like in the appropriate areas, you know, I think if you have a standard wooden pole right now, the standard from the state is going to be a stainless steel pole with the cobra arm. I think black is nice because it offers some continuity. It's in a residential area. There's a school there. I think if you're, you know, doing 73 and we've hypothetically got an area where it's undeveloped or whatever, you have to think about the future plan in that area and what it's going to be. You know, do you want to invest in over and above what standard would be or not? So I think it's always a case-by-case basis, but I think that area of 89, I think we should have some continuity with what we're currently doing through the city right now with the colored crosswalks and not fancy poles, but at least black poles.
Yeah, okay.
So that would leave another 27,100 to figure out, and that's part of your request tonight, is to have us give some guidance on where that other 27 grand would be
Yeah.
spent. I really like aesthetic bridges. I'm just kidding. Just saw it on the list. Anyway, Andy?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. We should have the colored crosswalks on that and on that road, and I don't know how much that costs, so I don't, you know, it's hard to say how much that 8 of the 27,000 colored crosswalks are gonna eat up.
Right.
Yeah, we'd have
So I
to.
don't know where to go after that.
It'll chew into it pretty good.
Will it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that, especially for everything Mike said and what you're echoing there too, Andy, which is, I mean, yeah, you got the aquatic center, you got the high school, even further down where 89 and Waterloo kind of meet, you've got yet another school and a field and things like that. I would really be interested in to see the cost number on that. Black poles, I'm really kind of in limbo on myself. Regan?
Oh, I was just, if you're looking for input on what to use that money on, I think anything that fits into that bicycle pedestrian category, which I don't, it's kind of confusing because it's on there so many different ways. But yeah, the crosswalks, bike lanes, whatever, signs, whatever, to
And-
promote the pedestrian and bicycle traffic.
Jason may shake his head or nod when I say this, but I think the project does include bike lanes.
think
Because
it
that's
did.
standard now.
Yeah.
And reconstructs. Good.
Mike?
Yeah, I think bike lanes are included if I remember correctly, but if your point is maybe getting more markings or more paint on the ground to encourage people using the bike. Yeah. Thinking back to the task force when we were talking about the CSS funds on the James Street project, I think we kind of tried to model the choices we made by the budget. Like, we didn't have a colored crosswalk on all 4 crosswalks of every single intersection. That kind of happened downtown and then feathered it out as we got to the edge. And I think doing the same approach on 89, we'll probably be able to spend the money pretty easily in colored concrete, if deciding where it's important and where you kind of feather it out.
Trina?
Oh, if we have extra funds after the light post and colored crosswalks, I would love to add a native prairie planting area. It looks like that is available on the list.
All right, well, we know we've got bicycle and pedestrian accommodations figured in here. It sounds like folks are okay with the expenditure on the black poles. Not sure where that leaves us as far as monies left to allocate, so perhaps Mr. Leith is gonna give us a fix on that.
Quick calculations, I'm thinking a crosswalk at Park, 2 at Folsom, 2 at Poet, 5, probably 1 at Waterloo, 1 at Avalon, gives us 7. Based, I don't have the actual dollars for this year's construction, but I have the estimates per square foot price from when we did James Street. Rounding up puts you around 15,000 for colored crosswalks in the corridor if we took those 7 locations. Plus or minus, even if you went on the top side of 20,000, that would be your remaining balance after the black poles. So I think you could probably get your colored crosswalks in there and maybe even still have a little bit left over. But I would say you're probably going to use the bulk of it with poles and crosswalks unless you, go another direction with the poles or reduce the number of crosswalks down possibly. So anyways, kind of give you an idea ballpark.
Great, thank you very much. That helps us put a beat on this for sure. Mike?
Do we have like a Wayfarer sign at the entrance of the city on 89? Like a welcome to Columbus?
I don't think we do.
Do we have a place to do something like that? I mean, I don't know if we have city right of way or.
I'm not
I only asked that,
picturing it,
you
but
know, I
yeah.
support Trina's idea of having prairie, but we have to have somewhere to put that.
I would think, and again, this might be a yes or no from Jason behind me, but in the process, there'll have to be real estate acquisition, and I don't know how that factors in and utilizing some of that for a sign or.
Okay. I think between the poles and the crosswalks, if Jason can get us a closer estimate, I guess, and see what's left over.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, if we have these 2 items for them to start with, and we'll keep filling in the gaps, or if we see another third project or something that would work, the native plantings or the bike lanes or something like that, we'll certainly dig into that.
Okay. All right, so we can move on to continue the discussion of a railing on East James Terrace. And I think we got pictures provided to us this evening too of some railing styles and designs, and I guess we're going to figure out where exactly this railing would sit and what that railing might want to look like, color, style, yada yada. I'm not sure. I guess I'd open it up first to figure what are folks envisioning this railing going just up the little step and around the corner just a short distance and kind of frame that out? Or are we looking at running the length of the sidewalk and cutting it open for the step? I mean, I guess I don't even really, the whole time we've discussed this railing, it's never been clear in my mind's eye the actual layout of the railing, not the aesthetic design, but exactly where we're going to place it. Rod?
What's the time frame on having to have this railing? Is this like something we have to have in the next month, or can we put this in next year? Someone mentioned bike racks and trash cans and stuff like that. Oh, was it me? If we could fit, if we're gonna have something artsy, could we fit this in the whole city scene, like have it all combined into one, so it all looks like it's continuity?
Yeah, Rod, I think because the DOT isn't paying for this, we can take our time and determine what we want and assess more of the costs. Because it's pretty clear the step's going in fairly quickly here, so we're certainly not going to have railing to go in upon, construction of the step. So fitting it in after post step is what we're going to be looking at here.
My thinking was if we could get a small committee going of the manufacturers around Columbus that want to help out on this, we get them together and all in one room and talk about this. An idea.
Regan?
I was just thinking, since we do have some time and we have a lot of options and details to work out, if it wouldn't be appropriate to include this in part of the budget conversation for next year, so that we can plan it and plan it.
Trina?
I was thinking sooner rather than later for the installation. For me, the purpose wasn't necessarily to be beautiful, but just to help out for tripping hazards and people not paying attention to notice a tiny little step. I didn't want to wait a whole another year. Although I wasn't looking for it to be beautiful specifically, I want it to be beautiful. I'm picturing two short little railings on each end, preferably with handmade, possibly redbud trees curved into it. I'm not actually expecting that, but that's really what I'm picturing if we have an available iron worker in town that's reasonably priced.
Andy?
Yeah, so to answer your question, Reagan, what I was thinking was runs the length of the step. You have a cut out on the end, maybe one or two in the middle, somewhere, maybe one in the middle, one on the other end, with rails on both sides as well as you're going up.
So rails going up
Yep.
both sides?
Both sides.
And one up the middle? Is that what you said?
No, and then, no.
Okay.
It's hard to. Like that. No, Rod. No, not quite. So it runs the length of the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
You have to open it up for people to get from the street to the businesses. So, you're gonna have a rail on maybe each end. Cut into it. You have to cut into the rail, to the long rail, with a couple of entry points with, a handrail on each side to get up the step, or a rail on one side. It doesn't matter. That's what I was envisioning.
Thank you, Andy. I think that kind of, gets to the point where we're all kind of having different forms in our head here. Mike?
I agree that you need to have access points between that railing, that we shouldn't have a solid railing covering that whole step. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of access. I would like something very beautiful as well, but I think that's going to be someone that comes to the city that says, I want to do this for you, because if you look at the difference in price from the two top to the two middle, you'll be surprised when that reality comes to us. And we have to have a discussion during the budget to pay for this. So I'm geared more towards something that's somewhat utilitarian from a budget standpoint, if we have to plan on that, and then maybe something will happen between now and we have to have them installed. I favor the two at the top because they're simple, but also because the one discussion we haven't had that's going along with all the step and railing issues is snow removal. And if you want to open up a can of worms, that could be an issue there. We need to talk to the business owners. I think if we're going to put up a railing, it should be a handrail to delineate between the step and the sidewalk. But if you get something that's very decorative and you're expecting someone to shovel snow through it and they're going to be beating it to death with shovels, it ain't going to look pretty for a very long time. And there has been enough discussion before my time here about getting snow off the sidewalk, off the terrace, onto the street so the city can pick up the snow. And if we start putting a barrier between those two, we are going to have other issues that are going to be less safe than having a railing there, in my opinion. So please kind of think about that as we approach this. We want it to be safe, we want it to be accessible, but we also need to get snow off of there in the winter. So I think having a railing too close to the ground is going to prevent that. This isn't a deck railing that's going to prevent a kid from climbing through it or passing a beer through it or something. This is a handrail to keep a division between the step and the sidewalk.
Matt?
Yeah, Mike, I completely agree. I think that as undecorative as the one in that top right corner is on this display, I think this is kind of more of a line that we're going to be going down just as a simple handrail. Andy, I think that we are going to have a cut in there, at least one in the middle. People get out of their parking spots and get up in that terrace area to jump up in there and get up actually on the sidewalk. The snow removal to kick that out into the terrace area and down from there is definitely going to be an issue. Somebody does need to check in to see what our actual requirements are going to be to make sure we're hitting ADA requirements for that. Because one of your concerns was having that whole toe board rail down there to stop the snow, but that might end up needing to be there because of the blind, visually impaired thing. I can't speak to it without, on my own. I think that needs to be brought forward to somebody to check Paul, somebody else, really dig into that to really try to narrow down what it's going to look like, and then from there we can go. So I don't think some of these are necessarily going to hit all the requirements of what we might need to do for that. But it's also, the step's not over a foot, so we might not be in that requirement as well. Then we might have a lot more play on that, but without double checking to make sure we're 100% right on which way we go on that. Maybe hesitant to talk more about anything other than a color. And that, it'd be nice to not have a lot of slats in there, have a little more space, but I think we need to get something nailed down as to what we actually need requirement-wise out there first.
So when you guys start talking about having a cut in the railing for the step, I mean, I get, like, the step has to have a clear path up to the sidewalk, and what I'm kind of leaning towards in my mind is exactly what Trina said, which is you have a railing as you're looking at those businesses in the streets at your back. You have a railing up your left side of the stair and a railing up your right side of the stair, and it goes up to the sidewalk and turns the corner and maybe runs 1.5 feet, 2 feet, basically like two little L-shaped railings. Is that what you were kind of describing?
That's pretty much what I was picturing. I'm looking at the one on the top right. So I would picture a little segment of that with the bottom railing removed, with beautiful curlies on the end.
Matt?
I think we're gonna have to run it the full length of that 78 feet or whatever it is, because the whole point of going down that path, I know it's not gonna look good, but the fact of the matter is it's not there to be decorative, it's there to be protective of the fact that we're going down a hill and now off of a step that we went with. And so I think it's gonna have to be from where each point tapers back down and ties into your standard terrace that the DOT is gonna tie back into, we're going to come from each end of there and then try to provide a reasonable accommodation in the middle of it someplace. I don't think we can do just an in-piece step up one. I think we're gonna need to go across, because otherwise
You think we have to?
I think we're defeating the purpose of the intent. And the intent that I had, which is if we were on the West James side and it was a flat road and we had a steep terrace, you would just go down the terrace. But the fact that we're on that hill, you're gonna go down that terrace and down that hill, which is why I pushed for step, and I think that to work concurrently with that step, you're gonna have to have that railing to keep somebody from going down that step now, because otherwise you're not mitigating any issue. You're just changing it from being a roller coaster ride to a no shit point. You know, you're going to lose it. And I think that at the end of the day, it's not going to be pretty. I think it's going to have to be utilitarian to allow for snow removal. We can go black to tie in with the poles, but I think it's going to look a lot like what we see in that top right corner picture. Because
Yeah, maybe I'm not envisioning the step right. I don't necessarily see the need for that. I didn't think the step was that dramatic to where we have to protect folks from falls. I thought we were basically trying to frame it. Put a ribbon on it, so to speak.
I think that ended up being two concurrent things that run simultaneous, not one or the other. And I think that was what I was trying to push from the very beginning, was that if we go down the path of protecting this, we're either protecting it with a railing or we're going to do a step to try to deviate from that, but you still got to protect it. We have to protect it some way or the other. And I think that the railing ends up being the hard point. But with that step, you can at least allow door opening into that now voided out area, and you can allow people who step out onto that terrace to walk to an opening and step up on the sidewalk. The kicker, the crux of the whole thing is protecting people from going down into the street. So
you would narrow the opening to the step?
The step took care of a door jam,
Right.
door ding, access issue, and now we're into the safety issue, which is we need to put up a railing the full length of that drop off. Not because we necessarily have to, because I think of the 1 foot rule, but because we want to, because of the fact that we're on a double grade.
So we'd run it like 78 feet and cut open just the middle part?
Some access in the middle to allow anybody who gets out of their car in one of those parking spots to then have to walk along that railing for 50 feet to then go up on the end. You figure you put one in the middle about where the spots line up, they can get out of the car, go to where there's a reasonable location to then get up on that step and get into the cardinal cage or get into the home expressions or whatever. Because I think if you're going to protect, then you should. I mean, we don't have to. We could just do a full straight rail and say go to each end. I think it'd make more sense to try to provide an opening to get people up in there, and you're mitigating 73 feet of the issue and having one location where you can get out, but you're still going to have those assist rails there to get up to make that step up. So you're still kind of protecting that area where it's at.
Regan?
I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be easier to find someone who can do some renderings
Thank you.
for us. Because I think I know Andy brought this up a couple meetings ago as well, that can I see a drawing at what we're talking about? I'm with Trina on the aesthetic piece. If we can at all possible work it into the budget. I understand the bottom needs to be clear, but we could certainly do something that's a little bit nicer looking than the top right-hand corner railing here. I would really like to avoid that since we're doing all this other work downtown. But yeah, I think someone, maybe 2 or 3 people, to propose renderings for us with the 2 options would help this discussion be a little bit more concrete.
Rod? Thank you.
I was with Matt. I was envisioning a railing going like on the top right corner here, going to 75 feet or whatever that was. I wasn't even thinking about a railing going up the steps. This is more of a railing so people don't fall down
The step?
incline, yeah. So it could have something.
I just think it's kind of silly to cut off access to the step. But, Trina?
Yeah, I really didn't want to block people from getting from the streets to the businesses for 70-some feet.
78.
It's for 78 feet. I really just wanted a little railing on each side for safety, both as a visual queue, and for anyone that just needs a little something to hold on to for balance.
Bye.
I guess, Regan, who do you see being, I think we need to make a decision. Is it, who is going to come forward with this information? I think at the end of the day, are we going to be requesting a task order with Jason to do something to render for us? Because I think we're sitting here turning our wheels and
right.
spinning and not, and Andy's right. I can spatially reason this because this is what I do, but I don't think it's everybody's, cup of tea to try to imagine a railing down the whole thing. So,
Well, I think even
and to make
if-
sure that we're hitting our requirements if we have them. I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna start playing devil's advocate and say, I don't know what we need because we need to make that decision, but.
Right, well, I think even if we're gonna ask someone for a cost, we're gonna need a rendering, and
Yes.
the 7 of us aren't gonna provide that. And I don't think Patrick wants to either.
I know people that want to do rendering.
Well, there you go.
Because we can't ask DOT now because we've now separated ourselves out.
Right, I'm
into
just saying, I
different
think
pieces.
we need a concept drawing here, or a couple, we
Yeah.
I
pick
agree.
one, and then we bid it.
So who?
I don't know. Rod said he knows someone who wants to do a rendering, so.
Mayor Tome.
Yeah, I think we probably need to have something to look at as far as deciding, the difference between having a 78-foot railing there or breaking points between that to the business. I'm sure the beer guy probably liked the version we had 4 months ago versus putting a railing up and having him walk 80 feet around it, or he's going to have to park in a different direction. And I think it's great to look at pretty pieces of railing and imagine that we're going to have a discussion at the budget where money's going to rain down on us. But I also want to keep focus on this question and why it came to the city council in the first place, and that we don't start using this as an excuse to beautify downtown, I guess, when we don't have the funds to do that. This is a safety issue that came to the city. The DOT is taking care of the concrete for us. We need to be realistic about finding a solution, and we need to find the basic cost to do that, and then talk about the finances outside of that. Why did we put the railing there in the first place? Is it aesthetics or is it safety? I was told that it was safety.
Right, and I think to that point, we'd need renderings, because my idea of the safety feature vastly differs from the picture in your head and the picture in your head, and I think we have like 7 pictures of in our, so let's get some pictures in front of us that we can all share. As far as the aesthetics, I agree. That's a discussion down the road, but first we need to know size, so we can figure out basic costs, and then on top of that, we can say, hey, do we have room for making it pretty? But first we need to know how much material we need. And at this point, the material I would think we need is a lot less than I think what you're picturing and what you're picturing. And to your point, Matt, what's our requirement? I think that's, so renderings and what's ADA guiding us on this, or are they not because of the 1 foot rule? Those are 2 big questions in my mind that I'll need some satisfaction on before I can give direction. But as far as renderings go, I mean, staff deals with this stuff all the time. They can, get a hold of the right people to.
I think we can
to do
find
this.
people to help us out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike?
As far as a rendering, I'm asking that if we're gonna go down that route and there's gonna be expenses, that we show the parking spaces, we show the access points to the business, and we show the 78 feet where the step is. That's what I'm interested in, is the relationship between those 3 things.
You could have the whole block rendered.
Yes.
That's fine with me. I
I-
just
but-
want to
but-
be able to have information in front of me to make an
That's
informed
the-
decision.
Exactly, that's the information I wanna see. I don't wanna see renderings of fences that are decorative. I wanna get the relationship between the front of the
Right.
business and the car and how they're
I
gonna
think
get
that's
across.
established. We'll look at practicality first and
Yep.
beautification second.
And
or
assist
third.
rails, as you said, Matt, assist rails, I don't know what you consider those to look like, or if they're needed with less than a 12-inch drop, and I guess the DOT would hopefully be able to help us whether there's a requirement there or not, no? So whatever we do is right. Or do we have to comply with ADA standards?
I didn't think that we had anything after we got our presentation from DOT this summer because they were perfectly willing to leave it as is. And so if they're willing to leave the slope, what's the difference with the step? The step's actually safer.
It's us going, yeah, because that 1 foot is kind of the make and break point where DOT puts in a railing themselves or not. And it's why it was step or the railing. I think as a community and in the situation, the unique situation we're in on that street, we need to take upon ourselves as a community to protect our residents and our visitors by going the extra 78 feet, if you will, to protect that. Because I think at the end of the day, if I was in a wheelchair and I rolled off of a slope over here on West James, I would go down, but it wouldn't be nearly as impactful as if you rolled down the hill and down that slope. So we went to the step. And that's why I pushed it, because I think at the end of the day, this is a bit of
sidewalk
a
was
unique
fixed.
situation that we need to go above and beyond on to really protect ourselves legally, and also because it is on us to do that and to protect the citizens of Columbus. It might be above and beyond, but I think that would be better to go above and beyond on this than to try to save a buck on, a length or only a partial. I think to protect for safety reasons, I think we have to.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And I think my point's not just about cost. My point is about it accomplishing our goal without making the thing impassable. I mean,
and I agree, but
let's get some rendering so we can see what we're all talking about, because at this point, we're just sharing words. So if we could get some renderings and get some different ideas, Patrick, of 78 feet with a few breaks in between, or like Trina and I were kind of envisioning up the sides and just around the corner, we can then start discussing all the other relevant factors. But, it's not a simple, I'm trying to save a buck and I don't care about safety kind of thing. So let's go ahead and move on. Review of pay request from Nelson Excavating, 2017 sanitary sewer system repairs. Yeah, I think Mr. Leith is making his way up to the podium.
So, what we have before us tonight is for the sanitary sewer collection system repairs for 2017. There is a closeout change order and a final, or actually pay request 1, which is also the final pay request. So this project was bid out. The work is completed. As you can see, the change order is actually a reduction in the contract amount by $4,000 some odd dollars. The rationale behind that is when the actual installation of the manhole went in one of the locations, we did not have to relocate the water main, and hence we had saved some cost on some curbing. And so, so what we did was, obviously, as part of this closeout, we did adjust the final contract price to reflect that. It saved us about $4,100 some dollars. And so we are just recommending approval of that change order to adjust that contract price to what was actually performed, and then approve the pay request before you tonight, which pays the contract out. But then this pay request does also hold a percentage of retainage, which is about $1,800 on this total contract of about $70,000. So, like I said, the work's complete. I think the seals for the manholes still have to go in, but obviously we're holding retainage till that work's complete. So we're very close to being done. We just kind of wanted to bring this before you tonight to get the adjustment made and then to approve the pay request. And then if you have any questions regarding the project or the change order or pay request, I'll certainly try and answer.
So the pay request for the $70,602, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
with this packet. So again, we adjusted the total contract amount, and then we had them complete the pay request for the work. And the pay request is actually for 100% of the work minus the retainage. And again, they're done with the work, and we've inspected it, and it's satisfactory to us. If you're aware, there's obviously several new asphalt patches around manholes, kind of random places around town. I think there's 11 spots or so, so.
Okay. Any questions or concerns on this? Otherwise, I guess we'll bring it forward
Yeah,
and
I think it's
vote
pretty
on the-
straightforward, so.
Yeah, great,
All right,
thank you.
thanks.
Number 12, James Street update.
I'll move through this as quickly as I can. As we kind of talked about in some of the other items, the workers are doing a lot of the finishing work, some of the stuff that signals sort of the end of the project. Paving, whole lot of paving, both concrete and asphalt, has taken place over the last couple of weeks. I haven't been down to the Dix and Industrial Drive. I suspect I'll hear more about that tomorrow. But that still seems to be the focus right now, to get that completed. And with that, we'll learn again what the target date to open up the road. But there's still quite a bit of work yet to do once the road's open. You know, the signage, some of the parking spots and things like that are starting to appear. So, yeah, it's the light's at the end of the tunnel.
Any comments or questions? All right. Number 13, use of the community building for the municipal court.
In your packet, the memo is related to a request of the municipal court judge to see if some space in the Columbus could be the home of the Eastern Columbia County Joint Municipal Court. I've spoken with Judge Breinig about that, and we tentatively looked at the 161 North Dickinson, which is the community building. Seems like it'd be an adequate space according to the judge. And on the other hand, it's space not currently used when they need it. So something that they want to do starting next year. So not something that would happen tomorrow. So this comes before you for your thoughts and questions.
So January 2018?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, community building, I know Recreation Department has their meetings. I think HLPC holds theirs as well. And other than that, I don't know if there's much activity there.
They had, I believe, a couple of like yoga classes or things like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Andy?
Can you clarify, wasn't this where it used to be? Well,
Before my
I
time.
lived in town 7 years and I had to go there once, so.
Oh,
Rule breaker.
It was, it was my wife, but I had to help her. So it was the same place, right? That's where we're talking
I
about, this
think
building
so.
right down here?
Right at the end of the block.
Yeah.
On
Yes.
the other side.
Yeah, it was
And
mentioned.
was
in
there
the
any
meeting.
problems then? Like-
I wasn't here then, so I don't know. Yeah, and I haven't had to visit it, so.
Okay. Hey, it was my wife, yeah.
Regan?
So I was at the meeting where this came up unofficially. I think there is a real need. Columbus does contribute a large portion of the folks that need to visit there are from tickets in this area. So, and I think it's great that they're looking to us to expand in space, and we do have the space available. I think it would be something definitely worth considering for our residents and make it more convenient. But it'd be nice to have the court located here.
Matt?
I guess the question I had, that last paragraph you have on the memo, being a public entity and arm of the city, there would be no rental fee involved. So basically, we'd be letting them use the space without really doing anything for us. Greater question, why are we not looking to fully occupy this building on a more regular basis, or take it off of the tax roll, or put it back on the tax roll, take it off of the city ownership? I guess, is this something that we're gonna be looking into as part of our long-term usage plan? It's kind of opening up that conversation. It's nice that the court would use this, but I feel like it does sit idle, and I know HLPC, we've met before at DPW in the evenings, it's closed anyways. I guess it's kind of a greater question to you, Patrick, / everybody else.
Yeah, I think it's part of, it's a space that we'd like to use more. There hasn't been any solid plans to pursue that. I think we can get some help from an analysis of our spaces, and that's something that we've been talking about, in the budget for next year. But I think there are potential uses that could benefit the city, but they haven't emerged.
If we go through with this, is this just for the 1 year, or it's like are we gonna have like an actual agreement with the Eastern Columbia County Joint Municipal Court, and it would just be on a recurring yearly basis, or could we?
We would want to formalize an agreement
Okay.
as to the length and how long. I think those things are up in the air.
Okay.
Mike?
Same question, was the length of the agreement, and why did it move from Columbus to Fall River?
I don't know. Don't know.
It was in City Hall here. I don't think it was.
That's what I thought.
I went over.
Overcrowded here before the remodeling took place.
Okay.
You had people standing in hallways up and down until after 5, 6 o'clock at night,
Okay.
all afternoon, so I think part of that, it was just not a lot of space.
Okay.
And you're using, because now his office, that's where the area was.
Okay. Matt, your comment about the rental fee, I'm assuming we're not contributing anything to them for having the court held up there, so it's,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be asking for anything for having it 1 day down here. My concern would be the length of the agreement, and also, do they need storage space? Are they just showing up for tables and chairs in a heated space, or do they need a closet to store any equipment or any records or anything like that?
Yeah, those issues haven't been discussed yet. I
Okay.
think if we get just an initial feel, we can dig into those issues.
I'm supportive, yeah.
I'm supportive of it as well. And to piggyback off what Matt said, I think it can be part of the further discussion on use of facilities in our city that are city property, but I don't think we'll have that all answered in calendar year 2018. So I'd be definitely okay with giving them the next calendar year. And, if we find new alternatives for 2019, hopefully we have that established early enough on, we could give them a heads up. But, to both their points of, the length of the term, that would probably be good to know. But yeah, I like the benefit of having it in town too. So not collecting rent's not as big a deal for me, because I think there's a community benefit in not having, the multitude of us traveling to Fall River, which is, a third of our population. So more of us are going there than Fall River, I'm sure. Andy?
Yes, I also support this. The term of the contract I'm up for, or term for the length there, I'm up for discussion on. 1 year, 2 years, whatever it might be. Mike stole my question about why it changed to Fall River. I did also want to note that I was on that committee, and I do know that a portion of the, forfeitures come back to the city.
Yep.
So it's paying for itself. That's it.
Trina?
Oh, I'm definitely in support of this. Think it'll be a good amenity and good use of the building. My only question is wondering if one group or the other might need to move their time by an hour, just so that their court isn't there until 5:30 or 6 p.m. while the historical landmarks group is waiting. So just wondering if they could.
That's something, that both Judge Breinig and Carolyn from HLPC have talked to, and both seem amenable to adjusting, to make this work. So whether the court changes its date or HLPC changes its date, I think there's agreeable ground there to make things happen.
Excellent.
Yep.
Regan?
So is my understanding at this meeting, obviously gaining in interest with this discussion, the board would have to meet again, and they'd have to call a special meeting to specifically discuss this, to make it official anyway. So just wanted to point that out. I don't know that it would necessarily come up at our next meeting to take action on because of that. So just FYI.
Thank you. So yeah, it sounds like there's support, but we just want to know how long they want to use it for. And it sounds like, according to what Regan said here tonight too, we're not going to need to turn around on it that fast. But yeah, let's. Do we give you direction?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Sometimes I get confused up here. Not sure if we've really answered your question. So, all right. At this point, we are going to skip item 14 because that was removed from the agenda. We're looking to go into closed session. Before I take a motion on this closed session, if we do go into it, we will not return to the air. We don't foresee taking any action on this closed session item this evening. So at this point, I would take a motion to go into closed session pursuant to 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation data for any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, 2018 employee wages, and update city clerk recruitment.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please. You got the motion and the second, Pat?
Yes.
Okay.
Hendrickson?
Aye.
Kenny?
Aye.
Malat?
Aye.
Reed?
Aye.
Rule?
Aye.
Jackson?
Aye.
All right, so that concludes this meeting's evening, and we will return November 7th for the regular meeting at 6:30 p.m. Thank you all for tuning in, and good night.